Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all doing good and well. So we move on now to episode 5 of the Dark Horse Disc series. And this week we are talking about Ozzy Osbourne's The Ultimate Sin, which came out the 10th of February 1986. So we're going to follow the usual format of the last few videos. We have with us two of our regular guests for this series. We've got John from JC Rock and Metal Reviews. Hey John. And we also have Hector from Chill Dude on a Couch Reviews as well today. So I think, you know, if you're watching these videos, if you're following them, you know the drill now. So we're going to start by talking about our first experience with this album, what our first impressions were, what we thought of it. And we're going to start, I think we'll start with John again. I feel like you're an Ozzy, you know, a pretty big Ozzy fan, if I've got that right.
Well, yeah, Ozzy is, I guess, like the first, the first metal band I ever listened to was Black Sabbath, obviously.
Black Sabbath, yeah.
I'm kind of from that generation, so I'll give a little background on the history with Ozzy. You know, the first Black Sabbath album, I think it was that compilation one called "We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll," and actually, back at that time, I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and I got into this music because I have an older brother. He's 2 years older than me, and he used to buy a lot of these records. So he kind of introduced me to Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne. So he had the records, the first one, like the Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman. He had like the first couple of them, and Rock the Moon. Now, what's funny is this is one of those albums that was kind of like in the middle, because when I started getting into metal, the first album I bought from Ozzy was the one that came right after this, was No Rest for the Wicked, I believe. So what's it called? Or the one with Crazy Babies. I think it's called No Rest for the Wicked. That was the first album with Zakk Wylde, and that was the first album I bought. But this one, The Ultimate Sin, I think I listened to it for the first time maybe around maybe 10 years ago, let's say. You know, I listened to it a lot later because it was like in that like middle period when, before my brother was listening to the early Ozzy albums, and I got into him with around 88, 89. So this one I always liked. It was different. I knew Shot in the Dark. I used to watch that music video. I think they used to play it on Headbangers Ball back in the day. But this one had a different sound. I think they were going more towards like a hair metal sound, like glam metal. And I think that might be one of the reasons, and I'll talk about that in the next portion. But why people don't like it. But I always liked it, and I think it just has some really like very accessible songs. They're catchy. There's some really good deep cuts, which again I'll mention later. And I think it's just the album just has a nice flow to it. So this was actually one of the albums that maybe like around like 5, 6 years ago that I was listening to a lot out of his entire discography. I think it was just one I kind of gravitated towards because it was the one album that I didn't listen to that much from his older period. So that's basically my experience with this one. I think it's just that one album that it was a little newer to me because I listened to it like later for the first time. So that's it. Yeah.
Nice. So that comes to me. So what was I doing when I was listening to this album for the first time? It was last week. Yeah, I gotta admit, this was an album of Ozzy that the only song that I have heard of was Shot in the Dark, because let me explain. First disclaimer, people, I do not hate Ozzy. I went to Ozfest. I love Black Sabbath. But my experience getting into Ozzy was in the 90s with the No More Tears. And he had, in 1997, I was working at Blockbuster, and that's where they had like the Osman Comic. They had like a double disc greatest hits. It had Black Sabbath, it had Ozzy. So those are the Ozzy songs that I listened to, more of the hits. So the Ultimate Sin, I knew it existed, but back then, there was no Spotify, there was no streaming. So if I didn't have it physically, I could not listen to it. So, and after streaming, I don't know, I never got around to listen to it until the Green Man said, "Oh, let's talk about this album." I'm like, "Great, I never listened to this album." But I listened to it this week on repeat listens, so I could, get the gist of it. And the only song that I heard was "Shot in the Dark," and I can say I enjoyed this album. I think there's some deep cuts here that we'll talk later on about this album. But yeah, that's what my experience. I hadn't listened to this album until this week, so it's like it's a new album for me, except for "Shot in the Dark" that I've listened to so much. So yeah, I can't go here and say like, oh, I've listened to this album for years. No, this week.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my experience with the Ultimate Sin.
Yeah, I mean, even with a lot of the classic heavy metal bands, there are a couple of albums I still haven't, scoped out yet from bands like Judas Priest. So I'm in a similar sort of situation. There's still albums for me to discover yet.
No, that happens.
Very kind of well-known albums.
Yeah, I could listen to the Gatekeeper saying, "Poser, you're not a true metalhead."
Yeah. So this album for me is quite this has a special place. I say there's the phrase special place in my heart, I guess. I really remember when I bought this album. So a lot of albums I don't tend to remember when I necessarily bought them, or these days downloaded them or got them on CD or whatever, but I remember the day. I got this album, and it might be because it was the day I found out my A-level results, which, the exams we have. And I found out I got a place at the university I wanted to go to. And so it was a really good day for me because I was really happy about that. I'd been to the university to see what it was like and really liked it and stuff. And so I wanted to treat myself to something. So you can guess. I went to this old record store, which sadly is closed and is no longer about, in my old hometown. And they were a heavy metal record. They had loads of heavy metal albums there and stuff. And yeah, it's a shame that they're not around there anymore, I don't think. But it was a place called It's Electric, and I got the Ultimate Sin album from there. And I've kept the price tag just because I want to remember that I actually got an album from that record shop. And I loved it. There was something about it, and I think it was that it was so unashamedly, as John was talking about, it being glam metal. There was something at the time I really liked about that, and I warmed to the tracks very quickly. And I really liked, we'll go into the tracks a bit later, actually, because that's one of the later rounds, isn't it? But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. So I have a positive memory of Ultimate Sin. It's interesting, some of the behind the scenes stuff, or things I read about in the run into this album, that there's quite a lot happening that I didn't know about, in particular, like tensions between, I think, Jake, the guitarist, and Ozzy, and seemingly the producer, and various things going on, which I may touch a bit more about later on, rather than this current round. But yeah, there's an interesting kind of backstory and lead-in to the Ultimate Sin as well. And the album title, because of that, is a little bit ironic as well, that it's called the Ultimate Sin, I think. But I will get to that soon. So I'll move over to John again for why you think the album might be a bit overlooked, and if you can, name 3 favorite tracks as well.
Yes, that's easy. The album is overlooked. I think it was different. It was more of a commercial sound. If you listen to the first few Ozzy Osbourne albums, they were kind of like a little heavier, a little darker. Now Ozzy is always like known for his guitar players. So first 2 albums, you had Randy Rhoads, that very like neoclassical guitar playing, and I mean, he was one of a kind. He was gone too soon. And those first 2 albums are classics. The one after that, Bark at the Moon, this was the first Jakey Lee album. It was good, but it still had that little like darker tone. The album cover kind of has that like Ozzy Osbourne, like a werewolf kind of thing. That one had some really cool like metal songs, like darker stuff. And this one, I think it's overlooked just because it's a little more, like I said before, it's a little more towards that glam metal sound. It's a little more accessible. The songs are catchier. I think maybe fans might have been turned away from that, because they did kind of change the sound. And then afterwards, when they moved towards like No Rest for the Wicked, and they kind of got like a little heavier and darker again. So I think this album, it's not like as like dark and like evil as far as the tone goes as like the other albums, but it's still lots of good stuff. So I'll go into my 3 favorite songs, and I'm gonna pick ones that are not the hits. So I'm not gonna pick Ultimate Sin or Shot in the Dark. So my first favorite is definitely Lightning Strikes. Just that guitar riff. I just love it. Just
Great riff.
I would say probably like the heaviest song on this album. And I think just because of that guitar riff alone is my favorite song. My second favorite is Killer of Giants. It's just one of his really great ballads. I love that song. It's just very, very melodic. It's just very memorable. And I think it's just one that stands out. I'm not really sure if that was a single, but that is a really great song, Killer of Giants. And my third favorite will be Thank God for the Bomb. Another one. It's just a very just melodic, memorable song. It's like catchy. When it was like the chorus sticks in your head, and and that's basically all I have to say. I mean, I could be naming other songs, but those were my top 3. So you want to continue, Hector? Yeah.
Thanks. So with my deep knowledge of this album after 1 week, I gotta say that I enjoyed it, and you're all saying that they sounded more glam metal. I wonder if it's because at this time, weren't they touring with Motley Crue at the time?
They might have been.
Yeah.
It's also that, and if you watch like these music videos, like Ozzy Osbourne had like this whole new hairstyle, and
he was blonde at that time.
Yeah, he had like this like 80s perm, and
it's just hideous. So getting back to the album, so obviously Shot in the Dark I've listened to a lot because that's the song I knew from this album. But actually I like other songs from it. I love the song Secret Loser, the second track.
Yeah, it's a great one as well.
I was driving the car and this was me. I'm a loser. I'm a secret loser. It was such a fun track. And I'm like, oh my God, this is such a sing-along that I was just like driving and sing along. Maybe people were looking at me in Miami like, what the hell is wrong with this guy? I was like, so I thought that track was really fun track, and really the chorus stays in your head. The Ultimate Sing, I think, is a great album opener, and I love that one too. Actually, Thank God for the Bomb was my least favorite song of the album. I don't know. I found it kind of cheesy. But the other one that also JC mentioned, Killer of Giants, I thought that was a great power ballad. And I love Ozzy's voice on it. So Secret Loser, Killer of Giants, and The Ultimate Scene. Because I wasn't going to pick Shot in the Dark because I listened to that song so much. It was the only song I knew from the album. But those other 3 songs, but my favorite is Secret Loser. I just think that song is such a fun track that I don't know if I don't think he plays that song, right? I never seen a set list where he plays that song, but I think it's a
I'm not sure it's one of those deeper cuts a little bit. Maybe.
Yeah. I just love that track. I think it's my favorite track of that album, hands down. So those are
great rhythm.
My 3 favorite tracks of The Ultimate Sing.
Yeah, okay. Well, so I think it's overlooked pretty much for the reasons that John mentioned, with it being a change in style a bit from previous albums, because actually when I kind of listen to this album, I find it one of the more enjoyable. Like I say, it's pretty catchy and infectious, a lot of this album. I mean, Hector mentioned Secret Loser. That's a very infectious track. And So it's got a kind of memorability to it. And I am a big fan of Jake E. Lee. And I think I love Randy Rhoads a lot. And those two albums are probably, I'm going to get into the ranking now already, but those are two absolutely stellar albums. Those early ones. And then you have Bark at the Moon, and then this one. And I think, because a bit like with a few of other episodes, these albums come after the classics later on or in the middle sort of eras, and sometimes they get sort of forgotten about a little bit. And the album after this it was No Rest for the Wicked, I think, after this one, wasn't it? Or was it? Yeah, and then No More Tears, I think. And so it's kind of midst a lot of really strong albums as well. But I think it's just a really enjoyable, it almost has an element of a guilty pleasure because it gets the glam metal tag about it as well. But I mean, it being the first Ozzy album that I listened to in full, absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was just yeah. And Jake's solos, we'll go into a bit about Jake E. Lee in a second as well. But I love I've got to pick 3 favorite tracks. I actually really like Never Know Why. And because I like the way that, at the end of that song, Jake does these amazing solos. He gets higher and higher up the neck of the guitar. And I really feel his solos, like, I don't know, with Zakk Wylde, I like Zakk Wylde, but with Jake's solos, I really feel the solos he's playing in the songs. And that might be a bit of a hot take or unpopular opinion, but it's genuinely how I feel about his guitar playing. I think he's a really great guitar player. And I like Killer of Giants, as you both said. And I can't resist but say Shot in the Dark, because that got me to buy this album pretty much. I'd heard that song before I went to the store to get this album. And it is just that introduction with the synth. And then it kind of has that lead into what is, to me, one of the best riffs. It's just that awesome guitar riff to kick off that song pretty much. So, yeah, and it's interesting with this, like the behind the scenes stuff that I was kind of reading about, and I might drop a link into the interview that there was with Jake E. Lee and his discussion about this album and Bark at the Moon, the albums that he was on and he was featured on. And I think he felt that he was cheated, or he was cheated apparently of writing credits and publishing on Bark at the Moon. So he wanted to make sure he got the credits for Ultimate Sin, apparently. So he ended up getting dismissed, I think, after this album at some point, after they toured Ultimate Sin. So there's interesting from his side of the story. There's it's an interesting interview. I think it was with the Metal Voice. So I will drop a link to that description, because if you like the Ultimate Sin, it's quite insightful as to some of the background in the lead-in to this album. But yeah, so what we'll do now is we'll go around one more time to discuss where we put this album in the Ozzy discography, the Ozzy solo discography, that is. So we'll go back to John for one last time.
Okay, yeah, I think it would be fairly high. I would have it, I guess Ozzy has 10 albums or something like that. So I would say it would be somewhere in the middle, because I mean, like, my favorites would be like the first few with Randy Rhoads, and maybe a couple of like the Zakk Wylde albums and like Bark at the Moon. But I would say maybe Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman would be my 1 and 2, and then 3 might be Bark at the Moon. And I might put let me see. Maybe I'll put this one like at like 4, like maybe like 4 or 5. So this would be up high, because I think like the ones, and anything after No More Tears would probably be like at the lower end of my ranking. But
sure,
I would even go as far as say like either like maybe 4 or 5. So that would be my ranking. I think it's just very good. I think it's just I definitely like prefer his like 80s, like 80s stuff. So yeah.
Nice.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, let me. I was reading about since I didn't know the album as well. I was reading a lot, and something that's very interesting out of the first 4 albums, this is the only album that was not remastered in 2002. And apparently there was a legal battle in the Shot in the Dark with J.K. Lee, like a writing credit and something, and that's why this album hasn't been remastered. So I was also digging, and apparently this is Ozzy's least favorite solo album, at least at the time. Very interesting. He was not happy with the production because he said that everything sounded the same. So maybe that's why it's overlooked, because I just remember, I didn't say why it was overlooked, but I haven't been listening to this album enough to say why it wasn't overlooked. So I did some digging. So I think maybe those are the reasons. Ozzy doesn't like the album that much. There was legal battles, and obviously it came out after 3 albums that are considered like classics. How would I rank this? Actually, with Ozzy, my favorite Ozzy Osbourne albums are No More Tears from the 90s. I just love that album. And the first one, Blizzard of Oz, that I have on vinyl. I think this one would go in. It's better than most of the stuff that he's put out in the 2010s to now, because I'm sorry, it's not good. I'm sorry, people. But I enjoyed this album. It was funny because it was like, I was listening to it like it was like a new album, because I never heard it except Shot in the Dark, which I always thought it was a great track. So I would say around the middle. It's enjoyable, and I don't mind that it's glam. I think it's a very fun album, so I enjoyed it, and I think if you like Ozzy, this is a great, very enjoyable album, fun album, and I like fun albums. It's very 1987. So that's what I have to say about The Ultimate Scene by Ozzy Osbourne, and thank you for making me listen to it. Finally,
you enjoyed it, genuinely enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. Yeah,
it's a fun album. I think it's a fun album.
Plus, it gets me pumped because I'm reviewing the new one next week. Yeah.
Well, in a way, this makes this a timely video, because I hadn't actually thought that when I know it's coming out, new album, and everyone's talking about it and everything. But this was one I wanted to do anyway. This start as a Dark Horse disc. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, so you'd probably rate this one reasonably highly then, Hector, I think.
Yeah, I would rate it. I would rate it highly in the middle. I would go. I would listen to this again, even if I don't have to do a video, because I genuinely enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought there's some great deep cut tracks here that I'm like, why doesn't he play these songs? Like there's songs there I never heard of, like only Shot in the Dark. So I was pleasantly surprised by this album, so I enjoyed it. Yes.
So yeah, where would I put this one? I think I really obviously love the Randy Rhoads albums. The sort of, those 2 albums, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, fantastic. Bark at the Moon is another favorite of mine. So those would be my top 3. Then it's kind of a bit of a, I think No More Tears would be next, I think. Then probably this one. And in a way, it might have been higher 10 years ago or so, because, this was my first Ozzy out. I have that kind of nostalgia for it now, even though I wasn't around back in 1986 in the sort of, I would have loved to kind of been a part of some of that glam metal stuff, I think. But yeah, I like this album quite a lot. So I think I would have it 4th or 5th, probably 5th in his catalogue in sort of conclusion. So I think that's it. I think it's kind of going to wrap up this this video. And yes, patient number 9 is out. It's coming Friday, right?
It's coming Friday.
Yes. In September. So I'm sure there'll be lots of reviews coming up on patient number 9. But yeah, I hope everybody's kind of enjoyed watching this latest Dark Horse Disc episode. So thank you very much to my guests, as always, John, JC Rock and Metal Reviews, and Hector from Children's on Couch Reviews. Do make sure you drop a sub to both of their channels. As I always say, I'm going to drop a link to both of their channels in the description box. They both do lots of album reviews, rankings, and I know Hector likes to do some interviews with up and coming bands as well. So lots of great stuff and lots of great content. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, of course, to the Green Man if you can spare one. Otherwise, for me, take care, everybody, and bye from all of us.
Bye.
Right.